basically as entrepreneurs, people who are looking to achieve something, the parts that I think are the components of that are identity, strategy, tactics, purpose, vision. Like we hear that. What's your vision? What's your purpose? Who are you? What's your business? All these things. And so these are the elements. And the interesting thing that he actually pulled out this rope, and it was a thick rope that had 5 knots. And he said, okay, Chris, so welcome to the Good Steward Podcast. Chris Evans here. And I want to share my journey from building a $70 million consulting business to losing it all. Together, we're going to explore the lessons of loss, burnout, and redefining success, finding true peace, joy, and contentment along the way. Welcome back to the Good Steward Podcast. We've actually been having some technical difficulty, but hopefully this time it's going to work. We're on episode 5, and today we're talking about the purpose train. I'm here with my friend, colleague, partner, buddy, the South African wonder, Johnny Nel. How are you, man?
Chris,
I just
good
gave
to
you
see
that
you,
name.
man. Yeah, that's
Like,
quite something. Luke.
You guys are built different over there.
Completely. Welcome back, everyone. And I must say, we're quite excited to get into the purpose chain today, where we identify identity in forms of everything. So as you listen closely, you'll start to recognize how crucial it is to get this order correct. With that in mind, Chris, is there anything you would like to share before we jump straight into it?
Let's go, dude.
Awesome. Let's go for it. So, Chris, can you break down the purpose chain for us and what are its components?
Yeah, so I got this from a guy named Steven De Silva. We had a call back in October 2022. So we just shut down the business. And I just got a letter from the FTC, basically the investigation letter. So I was in the pits. I was at the bottom. And it was a really interesting call at the time because I thought I'd figured it out. And people told me I'd figured it out. People paid me because I'd figured it out. But here I find myself in the valley of the shadow of death. And he gave me this analogy that was really interesting. Here's what I think has happened to you and what you might want to consider. If you have these components, you've got strategy, tactics, and visions, and purpose and identity, right? I think what you did is you had the strategy and the tactics as the primary things that informed everything. Meaning my business, my money, my real estate, all of those things I had as the top, as a priority, that were the thing that dictated who I was. And so this could be the fortunes that we amass, right? This could be our work ethic, working 12 hours a day. Like you hear proponents of that on YouTube that say, man, I am this because I work 12 hours a day or 15 hours a day or grind and hustle, or it might be you build massive company or you scaled to the heights or whatever it might be. That accomplishment, that achievement, that thing is usually in the category of strategy and tactics instead. So what I think what we might consider is, what if we were to identify who you truly are, and especially as it relates to who God's made you to be, who he's created you to be, and said, if we were to look at that, and if you were to operate from your true identity, and that would be the thing that informs everything, I think that could change the game for you. And I was struck. I was like, whoa, okay, yeah, there might be some, my energy wasn't that much because I was really burnt out, but if you could just bear with me, I was like, whoa, dude, maybe there's something to this. And so that's where you can call it chain or train, whatever. But if identity were the thing that pulled our vision and our purpose and the strategy and the tactics, because if we have it upside down, what if the stuff goes away? What if the business goes away? What if our ability to work 12 hours a day goes away? What if we burn out? Like, then what? Because I experienced that, and I know many other people experience that, whether you lose a business or you sell a business or you can't operate to the level that you did, whatever the thing is. And so he said that if you take this rope and if this knot, this top knot and this identity, if you were to nail that against the wall where it's fixed, whoa, dude, fixed identity, where I don't have to do anything to be that person, and I were to operate from that just the truth of who I am as Chris Evans, the gifts and abilities and skills that God's given me. And then if that were to inform my purpose, and if that purpose were to inform my vision, that vision were to form the strategy and tactics, and those things could be fluid, And I wouldn't go into the valley of the shadow of death if they changed, right? If I'd launched a new business and it failed and I could still have joy, peace, and contentment, dude, sign me up for that. And so I think that's a lot of what we want to talk about today, because if you lean into this episode, I think it can unlock your heart. Because if we operate from a place where our life, our identity, who we are is dictated by what we do, the strategy, the tactics, the business, the assets, the thing, man, we are in for at some point a rude awakening. Whether we have a massive failure, a macro failure, which I talk about in my book, The Joy of Failure, or we have micro failures. There's some things don't work out like we thought, and we just keep going on like we're going and living from that perpetual state of holes in the soul we've talked about in the past. But here's the good news that I want to share before we get to the next thing is being at the top of the mountain, proverbial mountain of entrepreneurial success, and realizing that's not the good news. I've come to discover in all my losses, the good news really was Jesus and what he said. And that is, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, the humble, the lowly, the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. Whoa, dude. That's an upside down kingdom. That's an upside down way of doing things. And man, what a relief that is. And I think that is part of what we need to talk about today, because I just, from my experience, what I've seen, what I've witnessed, lived through, we've really got it upside down. And that causes us to live from a place of disparity and lack. And I think that's just, it's not the best way to go. So,
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah, man.
It's so true. It's so true. Something that you touched on that I think is good for us to maybe just uncover a little bit is you mentioned that we use the strategy and tactics, right? Like the
Yep.
businesses, the assets, etc., to dictate who we are. But tying that into identity, let's explore that a bit. For example, if I'm thinking of reasons to pursue business, right? So what does that say about me? Like, your business is successful. What does it say? Does that give me my form of worthiness that I'm looking for? What other ways could you think one could identify that?
Yeah, well, I think so much goes to motivation. If we need the business because the motivation of our heart is to become something, to gain stature, to gain a level, to gain that authority, I think that's where we have the breaking of the chain or the priorities of the chain out of order. Because again, that's a race, that's a game that you can never truly win. Even though we might identify it as a win playing the game of business or entrepreneurship because we made $1 million, but truly it's not, because we're still in the pursuit and can never be satisfied. So I think that's the thing, where if we identify who we truly are, and again, in the context of God, we are truly loved already from our being. Like, think about a baby. And as a parent who you hold that baby and you're in so much awe of that baby and who they are. And they can't even talk. They can't even do anything. They can't clean the dishes or take out the trash or whatever. Just their sheer existence brings value. And there's such a deep love. So you take that and you multiply that to a degree that you can't comprehend. And I believe that's the love of God for us, and what our true identity should stem from, and how that informs everything else is a beautiful thing. Because then, man, if I know that I'm truly loved and I'm truly accepted and I have true value just in me as a person outside of any doing, then what does that look like from my actual doing? But I don't have to go build a multi-million-dollar business because of my internal act. But if I'm internally full and satisfied and know that I have a Father that loves me and cares for me and takes care of me, whoa, dude, that changes the game. And so I think that's what I've really started to explore and experience. And I think that you have as well. Whereas, man, I feel so full and content. And again, it's a bit uncomfortable and odd because I don't see that many people that live and operate in that space. And all of society, I think, doesn't operate in that space. They operate in the mentality of empire. empires never last. They're always selfish and pretty much always destructive. But that's what we adhere to, an empire building mentality, versus a healthy identity, I think, is a community building mentality, and how to serve and love our neighbor as ourselves. And I think this is a prime example of this, just this podcast. Like, you have abilities, you're a great communicator, and you can get on here, and when the tech's working, we can do this thing. And that's what we're doing, right? This is contribution. Our motivation is not to make $1 million from this podcast. Now, that could happen somehow, right?
Of course, yeah.
But it's not like we want to love people and to share our experience and what we've gone through. And that's operating from true self. It's not this thing that I need to create and perpetuate. It's no, dude, like you're seeing Chris Evans, especially when he's just being open and vulnerable and authentic, right? That's not a shtick. And so that's something I can do every day for the rest of my life.
Oh, that's amazing, man. Again, Chris, that analogy really paints a clear picture. And everyone listening, as you think about this, I'm sure you'll start to see how this would have such a form of impact in your life if you choose to start seeing what currently is happening, not by tactics, but rather through identity. Something that stood out that you mentioned there was a few things to me personally, especially the vision and the identity. I think a lot of times we as entrepreneurs, like you said, we can easily get locked up in this hustle mentality or growth mentality, and we set out all of these goals to achieve. But we never look at, but why do I want to achieve X, Y, Z?
Right.
Why do I want to? Correct. Exactly that. What is the reason for that? And I love what you said about the baby, the children. And we see business the same way, right? It's the business is the baby. And we are responsible for making the best decisions for the baby. But we also know that in time, this baby's going to need to be able to walk on its own feet. So what decisions and what choices am I making today that's going to allow that for the business, and that the business can be healthy? Because the business is only as healthy as your identity are. And the impact that the business drive also just comes down to your identity and the vision that you have for it in the grander scheme of things. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing all of that, Chris. That was such a mountain of wisdom there, man.
That's a great point. We should just highlight the business does come from your identity, right? Like, your identity will manifest in the business. So if you're operating from the false identity, not your true self, and those unhealthy motivations, right? Like, I need the business, or I need the money, or I need the status, that's going to manifest itself in the business in an unhealthy way. And I think ultimately that's where my situation went to, right? Was the death of the business, because it was all about, I have to hit a higher high. Like, I can never go backwards. I can never maintain the same level. And man, we might be making tons of money, but it wasn't better than the month before. And that led us to scale faster and faster and to grow as much as we could, which ultimately led to not being a good outcome. That's a really good point, dude. And I think hopefully you guys are taking notes and even allowing yourself to examine that, whether it's angst or anxiety or the thing, like, that's going to translate into your business. But if you're operating from your true self, right? Loved, value, worthy, outside of your business, outside of the external, outside of the tactics, the strategies, of working 15 hours a day, whatever that thing is, that marker for you, that goalpost. If you're operating from your true self, it might be uncomfortable. Like, I can testify to that. And I wrote about this in last week's newsletter. That was the subject line, I am uncomfortable. And it got a really good response, actually. I just saw this morning.
Hey y'all, Chris here, just jumping in. I want to tell you about the Good Steward newsletter. If you're not on that, go to chrisaevans.com/newsletter, chrisaevans.com/newsletter, and get on that. It's a weekly newsletter. And I write a lot about my experience in business, growth, faith, family, really all the things that if you're listening to this, I think that you could find a lot of value in it. And it is written by me for you. Go check it out.
But if you allow yourself to operate from your true identity, then you'll allow things to develop naturally, and you won't be motivated to make bad decisions like I did, which that's empire mindset. It doesn't matter the cost, even if it's violence towards my own soul, because if I don't value myself, then I'm okay with being violent towards myself. To me, being violent towards myself is exceeding my limits, always shaming myself, browbeating myself, wagging my finger at myself for the sake of the empire, for the sake of the attainment, for the sake of the acquisition. No, sir. When we put our fist up to that, heck no, I'm not doing that anymore. I think that's when we can start from that place of truly loving ourselves. And from there, it's patience and joy and contentment, all the things that we've been talking about. So.
Sure, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's quite a bit. And Chris, man, well done for overcoming that and being able to look back at it and reflecting and still being consistent. Like it's truly inspiring. Talking on identity and what that looks like, we've touched a bit on that already, but for everyone listening, they can identify that right now they have the choice to either still get motivated by the things that really doesn't carry any sustenance, but there's a new opportunity to operate from, a better identity and getting the identity in alignment with that vision. Why would you say is it important that the identity comes first in this chain, additional to what you've now just shared?
Yeah, because identity informs everything. That could be true identity, right? Or it could be false identity, because identity is who you are. And the result of operating out of an unhealthy identity is striving, which leads to burnout, restlessness, anxiety, angst, and living from a false sense of ourself. And according to Carl Jung, he was a famous psychologist, and a lot of like how therapy and psychology is done today is because of him. He calls it a facade. He talks in pretty great depth of this, which is not sustainable. And of course, outcome of that is unhealthy, as we've discussed. Part of the reason why is because living from a false sense is something that we have to maintain. We all want to image something. And I think the key word here is maintain. Operating from a false self, maintaining that false self is burden, and it's work. And it's all based on external factors. Money in the bank, huge business, huge team, whatever the thing is. So it's exhausting. It's a broken system. Now, here's the thing. I do believe that we were made to image, to reflect, but I believe that we were made to reflect the image of God because we're made in the image of God. And that's part of our identity. But when we try to operate outside of that, it's unworthy as who we are as human beings. It's not who we're made to be and how we're made to operate. And so operating from the healthy identity means operating from the true self, and that's sustainable. And then we're okay with saying no to the things that are not in alignment with that true identity. We're okay with letting go of deals. We're okay with growing at a steadier, healthier pace within our limits. Because not only do we value ourselves and who we truly are, but we value other people. We're not just trying to get what we can get from other people, dude. And of course, I think two parts of it too is operating out of peace, which is true identity, or operating out of fear, which is false identity. When we operate out of fear, very often, high percentage, the motivation is going to be, or the result is going to be greed. How can I get the most out of another person? Again, that's empire. So the reason why it's so important that identity comes first and understanding this is it informs everything else. If we're operating out of true identity, then that's more sustainable. We'll take care of ourselves, love ourselves, other people. If we operate out of false identity, I think there's a high chance that we don't love ourselves, we won't take care of ourselves, we won't love and take care of other people. And the results are a world where everybody's trying to gain status, get what they can get at the expense of their neighbor.
It's so true, man. And that everything ties there into vision. It's so powerful. Thanks for sharing, Chris. How does your purpose influence your vision? How would you articulate that for everyone listening?
Yeah. So right, identity is who we are. Purpose is what we do. And then vision is what we see. So my purpose, I believe, and I've wrestled a lot through this and come to the place of what the Bible says of what purpose is. And I believe it's to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Number two is to love your neighbor as yourself. Right. And then how that manifests, I think, is part of vision. So like this can be an example of vision, this podcast. For me, it's taken my experience, the real great parts of it and the real sucky parts of it, and offering that as hope, clarity, right? Instruction, wisdom, knowledge for other people. This is part of me loving God with all my heart, mind, and soul, and also loving my neighbor as myself, because I've paid a very high price for the wisdom that I currently have. A very high price, man. And right, if identity is who we are, that informs our purpose, informs our vision. Purpose is, right, what we are doing, and vision what we see and how we walk that out. And so for you, I think the question is asking, okay, what are my gifts? What are my abilities? What are my natural talents? And that's a journey that I've been on. And how can I use those things to love God, to offer that back to him, and to serve the good of my neighbor? And, the neighbor is not just actually my neighbor, but mankind. So you could have the gift of being a doctor, right? You can serve God and serve people through that gift. Or maybe you're great at math and you can help people get their finances in order. Or maybe you're compassionate. Like those are things that God has given you as a part of your purpose. So when you look at vision, it's okay, God, help me to see how I walk this out and contribute this. So having a picture of what that looks like. Again, this podcast is an example how we do consulting with different clients and their businesses to help them get clarity. That's an example of vision. It's a picture of what your purpose is to walk out.
So good. So good, man.
I feel like I'm being
Thanks for
really
sharing that.
long-winded with these answers.
Please do not hold back.
It's hard to translate this in 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. There's so much wisdom and so much more we can share on this. Can you share a little bit about just an example of how this chain has played out in your own life and business?
Yeah, so the beginning, it was the strategy, tactics of the business, the products, the money, the real estate. All those things were the thing that predicated if I was worthy, valuable, or not. And so I had to, one, achieve those things to obtain that status, to obtain that level, to obtain that accomplishment. Therefore, I would be valuable. I would have status. I would have power. And again, that's a rat race. That's a thing you can't win. You might, in the eyes of the world, empire builders, you might be seen as winning. But what about your soul? If I were to crack open your soul, your heart, your minds, the being of who you are, and to look inside, what would we find? Would it be someone who feels lonely, who feels isolated, who feels like, man, I'm just not as good as this other person, right? Good chance if you were to go back and you look, it's true. If you were to look at Chris Evans' soul, that's what you would find, right? And so coming to the place of accepting, one, that's really important, accepting my true identity and who I am, loved, accepted, worthy, and to make that the priority, to then take care of myself, allow myself margin and space. then it just, man, everything else that I'm actually doing, the purpose and the vision feels so much better and aligned. There's so much more potency to it now. There's so much more fulfillment and satisfaction in the work that I'm doing, putting my hands in the soil and cultivating those things. Even we've talked about this, man, where part of this process for me is I've taken tests and the Strengths Finder, like figuring out some of those gifts and talents that I have and really honing those in. And I'm like, if I were to take time, and I'm going to say this has been a challenge because it's not been directly correlated with money making and producing. So there's been a realm of like childlikeness with it of, okay, God, you've given me this ability to ideate and to create. What if I just take time and explore that and to write and to learn and to dive deeper on some of these topics? Dude, there's been a sense of fulfillment and richness in that I have not experienced making $1 million. And it's been a profound experience because, dude, I've never read that. If you want to achieve something, just go like play. And so there is just removing of all those things. And that's part of, I'm finding, man, okay, God's giving me these gifts. I can develop these, cultivate them, and then I can give that to somebody else. And there's not really a measurement to it. And that's part of the funny thing about it. It's not you're going to accomplish X, Y, Z in X amount of time, right? As we as marketers know, that's what you say. So there's an openness, there's a childlikeness to it. And I think that's been a beautiful experience for me, but also uncomfortable.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, man. I think
Yeah.
everyone can really take in from that experience, and they also recognize how easy it is to tie our worth to external success and the burden that it creates. Yeah, man, your transparency is extremely valuable. Thanks for that, Chris. What will happen could be perceived as self-explanatory, but someone listening to this right now might just feel that, look, man, I'm just starting out. I'm starting to grow the business. Things are looking good. I'm reaching call it now, financial goals and OKRs and KPIs. Everything is in alignment with the growth set out. What would you say if someone were to reverse this chain or skip the steps as you've elaborated on in this episode?
Yeah. I think if you're just starting out, think about this as every amazing oak tree. We've got an oak tree in our yard it's got to be over 100 years old. Every single one starts as a seed in the ground. And so just because you're not that oak tree yet doesn't mean you're not beautiful and that you don't have amazing potential, right? In light of like purpose and accomplishment and like all those things, accomplishing goals or whatever. So I think one, don't devalue who you are. Realize though that God has given you the uniqueness in that seed and those components that are you, that are up to you to discover and to start to cultivate, to water, to make sure the sun gets in. When we don't follow this process of identifying who we truly are and operating out of that true place, I think what we do is we end up suffocating. We end up allowing weeds to come in and suffocate that seed, suffocate that small oak tree. And it never actually becomes who it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to be. This amazing, huge oak tree that's now producing more, right? It's giving shade and protection, and it can withstand any kind of crazy storm. It has deep roots. Instead, it's looking at other trees in the yard, and maybe it's looking at a Bradford pear, which I've talked about in the past, which is an engineered tree. It's engineered to grow really fast and have pretty blooms, but under pressure, it cracks, it breaks. And also, if you get close to it in bloom, it stinks. It smells like something that you don't want to smell. So instead of comparing yourself to other trees in the garden, allow yourself the room and the time to grow deep roots. And that is this process of knowing who you truly are, your true self, and then from that place, identifying, okay, God, you give me these things. Then what's my purpose to walk out? What do I see like that actually the fruition of that, my vision? And then he's going to give you the strategies. He's going to give you the tactics if you trust and if you're diligent with those things that we've talked about. Everything else, though, you're going to strive. You'll fall into potentially the place of anxiety and depression and angst. And man, I'm not growing as fast as that Bradford pear, right? Which is a junky engineered tree that stinks. And it has shallow roots. That's not what you want, I don't think.
Good.
That's what happens, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that. And everyone, thank you all for joining us. As you think back on this episode and you reflect, whether you're focusing on your purpose or vision, you'll begin to realize how much each element of this chain really matters. Chris, what scripture are you leaving with us today?
Jeremiah 29:11. And this for me, this is a bullet, as your wife Janine would call it. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And a bullet is when you have that thought of, man, I don't have any purpose. I don't have anything. No, you call this thing to mind and you fire this as a bullet. And I truly believe that this is the case, that the Lord just have good intentions for you. Even in a world that's broken, fallen, and there's hard, difficult things, God has good plans for you. And ultimately, it's to be with him.
Amen.
That's it. Yeah.
What a powerful scripture. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in. If there is any question you have, or if there could be anything related to what we discussed today that you would like to find out more about, do reach out to us to support@chrisaevans.com. Do not forget to join the Good Steward newsletter if you haven't already. And Chris, please do not forget to tap a bit into what a knowledge portfolio looks like for all the visionaries listening, as I would assume there would be a lot of founders, business owners listening to this podcast. And I threw that in from the hip here, but guys, I'm going to work on Chris to produce a form of asset that can help you to identify, to idealize in a specific way, that can help you to systematize and get clarity of mind where you currently position at. This is something he does extremely well. And I know it's very sacred to him. So there you go, Chris. He gave it.
Right.
We got the confirmation.
Unscripted, dude. So you just put
You
it
got
out
it.
there like, now I have to do it. I love it.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks everyone for
All
joining.
right. Much love.
Ciao.